Let's talk about testing ideas. You have all these ideas, you have all these things you want to do, things you want to build, but how do you actually figure out whether or not they're going to work? How do you actually figure out whether or not they're going to be effective and solve the problem that you're setting out to solve? Well, this is the perennial problem of designers and product people in general, but there is one really great tool in our tool belt that we can use to actually help us figure out if what we're building is going to be successful. Over the last 5 years, as I've been working on Alloy Healthcare, I have been working on a variety and have built a variety of prototypes, everything from Envision, clickable PNG prototypes to Webflow basic HTML prototypes, to Figma prototypes, Framer prototypes, and just about everything in between. I've tried just about every single tool that's out there. But there is one tool that I started working with last year that has proven to be more powerful and more effective as a prototyping tool than any of those other ones. Basically all of them combined, if we're being honest. And that tool is code. Before I get too far into talking about what prototypes are and what prototyping software exists out there right now, I want to talk about why we actually make a prototype. According to Google, the definition of a prototype is basically something that helps you create a first or preliminary model or kind of iteration of a thing. You can think about this, prototyping a particular, prototyping a particular product. And when it comes to software, this is very much the same thing. We use prototypes to gauge whether or not ideas, direction that we want to go with a particular product are going to be effective. If you don't want to spend hours and hours and hours and money upon money, just like thousands and thousands of dollars building a product, if the product is not going to work or be very effective. Over the last couple years, we have seen a litany of prototyping tools come to the market, particularly for software development. These things have ranged everywhere from Envision, which is basically takes a PNG file and makes it clickable, all the way to products like Framer, where you can actually insert some real code and based on the designs that you've created and actually make something that's clickable and somewhat interactive. The goal, though, is cheap and fast, but also convincing enough to your users that they can kind of give you real reactions and give you real feedback about how your product might work in their day-to-day. And the best prototypes almost feel like they're not prototypes at all. They feel like a real working product. The biggest piece of prototyping software that exists right now, though, is a piece of software called Figma. Now, Figma is a wonderful design tool. It's a collaborative tool, and I have nothing but good things to say about it. And their prototyping feature is actually quite powerful. They have things like being able to automatically switch the instance of a particular component on hover or on a click. So you could kind of mimic hover transitions or hover states, or if you click something, you can kind of mimic a click state or things like that. And that's really, really powerful because it gives the designer a really great arsenal at their fingertips to test an idea with a particular user. But even Figma's prototyping capabilities, as great as they are, do have their limitations. For me, as I have built prototypes in the past for HealthcareOS, I have tried to figure out how to make Figma do what I want it to do, and frequently there are some really complex interaction patterns that I want to be able to build and try to test that just aren't possible in Figma, or for that matter, in most other pieces of prototyping software. The most common one that I would find that I need to test pretty frequently, or at least very intensely, would be an editor, some kind of note editing experience. If I can't actually type and see the words and things that react to those words, how can I actually know whether or not this thing is going to be effective for my day-to-day? And so this is where code comes into play. Now, in the middle of 2021, I started building a prototype with code. The library that I'm using is called Vue. Now, Vue is a JavaScript framework, but let's just say it's a much faster way and much more efficient way to build what is in essence a web app. Now, Vue and its very close cousin React are used by a lot of the big tech startups. React was actually made by Facebook. It's built with, I think Twitter and LinkedIn are both built with React. And so these are very powerful frameworks, and but they offer a lot of simplicity as well. So you can pick and choose which elements are going to help you be most effective for your use case. Now, when it comes to Vue, my stack is actually fairly simple. I want something that's going to be able to be updated and added to very quickly and easily, but I don't necessarily need the full complexity and interactivity of a complete web app. So I'm actually using a static site generator. And what this does is it gives you a very quick and easy to use site. They're very popular for blogs and things like that, but it can also be really great to be using for a prototype for an app. And this is because in app prototypes, you typically have a couple flows or a couple key kind of pages that you're trying to test. And the closer that those can be to reality in the browser, the better it's going to be for the end user. So by using a static site generator, we can create quite a lot of complexity and interactivity, but we can pick and choose where that interactivity and complexity goes. Now, the static site generator I'm using is called GridSum. And one of the things that I really like about GridSum is it allows me to use an Airtable database to actually power the data inside my product. This is actually kind of the core problem that a lot of prototypes will run into, is realistic data. So not only do we get the kind of simplicity and complexity where we need it in terms of interaction, but we get realistic data that's being pulled from a database instead of needing to go through and update every single little thing on every single page or every single component. This makes it much more effective and much easier to actually prototype and build multiple concurrent flows that all have slightly different use cases. Now, case in point for HealthcareOS, we might have a physician who's a primary care physician. And one of the challenges for primary care physicians in their EHR is that they have to kind of go between different types of patients constantly. So they might see let's say an older or elderly person who has quite a laundry list of problems and issues and medications that they're on. And then their very next patient could be a teenager who has almost nothing wrong with them. And this challenge is what makes the cognitive load for primary care physicians so challenging. In order to test this effectively, I need to be able to come up with and create multiple use cases that are based on roughly the same flow, but different use cases that have different data and input requirements from the end user. Using a static site generator and Airtable allows me to do this with relatively little input on my end. Now, this Vue prototype is still pretty early on, so there's still a lot that needs to be done. It's still pretty rough around the edges, but in the interest of being transparent, I do want to show it to you. What we're looking at here is an index page. This is really just for me. I want to have this be kind of a splashy, kind of like, hey, welcome to this demo. You know, this is a product demo, etc., etc. And we hit start. Now, you can see that already, like what we have here very closely resembles some recent designs I've been working on. I don't know if I've showed those or not, but you can see that even some of the things here around like checked-in status, room status, things like that, those things are there. We also have more interactive elements. So like the buttons are hoverable, cards will be hoverable. They're not right now, but they will be. And you can actually click on things and get into them. Now, this is where I'm running into some issues in terms of the actual kind of experience. I'm running into some development and kind of build issues here, but you can see that we actually have an appointment space. And inside this space, I can actually click between my different patients for the day. Again, they're not in order and they just do this weird disappearing thing for some reason. I don't know what that's about. I haven't figured out why it's doing that. But when I click into Jerome Watson, Jerome Watson's information appears within the page. And this is critical because I don't have to go in and build every single one of these pages individually. I can just build this all from an Airtable database. I can just query the data and then load it into templates. But the other place that we have running is an actual kind of progress note. Now again, this is pretty rough, but you can see that my editor is ready, so I can actually type in like a problem, and then I can type in, you know, different pieces of text, and then I can continue to add interactivity to this over time. Now this editor is an editor called TipTap. And TipTap is a really great kind of flexible editor. I only have to load the functionality that I need, and it's actually pretty powerful underneath. Now, you might be thinking, Robert, this is a lot of work to test an idea really quickly. And this is where I am trying to come up with ways to make this more scalable and fakeable. This is a critical thing because one of the things that is going to be really difficult about an electronic health record is that you don't have all of the context ahead of time. There's a lot of, particularly for this prototype or for this product experience, it requires quite a lot of AI or natural language processing, none of which I'm capable of building and none of which is honestly really even necessary. If I know that Jerome here has a certain set of conditions and certain set of problems that he's coming in, I can make some educated guesses with the help of some advisors around what kinds of information a physician is going to collect and what they're going to type in. Now, based on that, I can actually fake some interactivity and functionality here. So let's say, we want to type in something along the lines of, patient has been running a fever for 3 days, complains of headache, fatigue, and muscle aches. That's our chief complaint. So I might write in, we might do a review of systems, right? A review of systems, which is basically just the physician going around and making sure that everything is okay on every body part. And this review of systems includes things like head, ears, eyes, nose, and throat, the heart, vascular system, all of the different systems of the body. And they might start making notes, they might start making bullet points, they might want to actually write out full sentences. And if they want to insert certain pieces of data into this, I can actually, instead of needing to kind of theoretically figure out what that's going to be, I can actually just make some images that fit the design system that they could then insert. So it feels like they're inserting real data and data that's being pulled in from a backend somewhere, but it's actually just an image based on an educated guess around what they want. And this is kind of the goal here with faking it till we make it. Parts of this interactivity, like being able to type in words, being able to actually edit something, being able to potentially use key commands to trigger things, those types of things are the core pieces of functionality we want to test. So if you're working on a product or if you're working on an idea, I would really encourage you to think about code. One of the things I think is most important about code is that code gives you the capability to do things that you really can't do in other prototyping software. And so by being able to fake that and kind of get this into a browser, and even if you are faking some of it, you're going to get much more realistic results and more realistic reaction from your users and from potential customers around an idea. If you found this video interesting, I'd love for you to give a subscribe or a like down below. Comment down below and tell me what your favorite prototyping software is or what your favorite code language, framework language is, if that's something that you're into. And I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you real soon.